In a world of flashing headlines and televised handshakes, the line between what is real and what is performed is often blurred. The ceasefire between Iran and Israel, two nations burdened with deep-rooted history, ideological conflict, and regional tension, has brought the world to a pause. A headline reads, "Peace achieved," and for a moment, people exhale. But we must ask ourselves, is this truth, or is it illusion? A staged agreement is crafted to appear like peace. It is rehearsed, precise, and controlled. There are smiles for the camera, signatures on paper, and the illusion of harmony. But real peace, authentic, lasting peace, is messy. It is built through uncomfortable conversations, genuine empathy, and vulnerability. It doesn't always look neat. It doesn't always make the news. Because real peace doesn't exist to be seen. It exists to be felt. Truth doesn't wear a mask. It doesn't play to the crowd. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we know how easy it is to manipulate perception. Governments, just like people, have a tendency to act out scenes of resolution without changing the script beneath. A ceasefire without trust and transformation is just a pause between acts in a play that's been running for generations. It's like freezing a conflict in time, hoping that in stillness, people will believe the storm has passed. But peace that is only seen and not lived will never last. You have to look at what happens when the cameras turn off. Do the weapons go back into storage or into shadows? Do the leaders speak peace in private or only in public? Do the people on the ground feel safer, freer, more whole? Or do they feel they've just become extras in a performance too big to understand? These are the questions that reveal whether the moment is truth or illusion. Real peace begins in the heart before it appears in headlines. It is reflected in the way ordinary treat each other when the spotlight is gone. It's about whether a child in Tel Aviv and a child in Tehran can both wake up without fear. Whether a mother can send her child to school without a second thought. Whether a father can build a future without wondering if a missile will erase it. It's too easy to get caught up in the appearance of peace. But illusions are powerful. They distract, they comfort, and they deceive. That's why we must sharpen our discernment and not take the surface as the whole story. A staged agreement gives the world a sense of progress, but it is a fragile facade if nothing underneath has changed. Real peace doesn't just make promises. It keeps them. It doesn't just silence guns. It opens hearts. It doesn't just calm the moment. It transforms the future. Understanding the difference between truth and illusion is not just a political act. It's a human responsibility. Because if we can't tell the difference between performance and principle, between appearances and action, then we become complicit in the deception. And the cost of that ignorance is paid not by those in power, but by those trying to live in the world they shape. In times of conflict, people often look outward. They point fingers at leaders' nations, ideologies, at anyone but themselves. When the world trembles under the weight of war or when a ceasefire is announced, we instinctively ask, what are they going to do next? But the real question, the question that holds power, is, what am I going to do now? Because peace, no matter how large or distant the conflict may seem, is a responsibility that lives in each of us. It's easy to believe that peace is forged only in high offices and war rooms, that it is a product of diplomats and politicians. But real peace, the kind that takes root and grows, starts far closer to home. It starts in how we speak, how we forgive, how we lead by example. You don't have to hold a title to hold influence. You don't need a national platform to create impact. What you need is conviction. The responsibility to build peace doesn't belong only to those at the negotiation table. It belongs to every one of us who wakes up each day and chooses who we will be. We live in a time where opinions are louder than truths, where noise is often mistaken for leadership. But real leadership, real responsibility, begins with restraint, wisdom, and courage. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that changes hearts. It takes more strength to hold your anger than to unleash it. It takes more bravery to forgive than to retaliate. And it takes more wisdom to listen than to speak. In this sense, we all hold the power to be peacemakers, not by changing the world all at once, but by changing how we live in it. One moment, one choice, one conversation at a time. When two nations enter a ceasefire, the paperwork may be signed by governments, but the real peace must be carried forward by the people. Soldiers may lower their weapons, but civilians must lower their hate. The ceasefire is the opportunity, but responsibility is what determines what comes next. Responsibility says, I will not carry the pain of history in the future. Responsibility says, even if I was wronged, I will not let revenge guide me. Responsibility says, the world may be broken, but I will not be. And this isn't abstract. It shows up in real daily ways, in how we raise our children, in how we speak about people who don't look or pray like us, in whether we build bridges or burn them. If the world is filled with division, that's not just a reflection of politics. It's a reflection of personal decisions. The person who gossips, who dehumanizes, who holds on to hate with both hands, they are not bystanders in conflict. They are participants. Just as the person who seeks understanding, who lifts others, who speaks with compassion, they are builders of peace. There's a reason why responsibility feels heavy, because it is. But it's also where your power lies. Responsibility doesn't just mean doing the right thing. It means realizing that your actions echo further than you think. A kind word, a gesture of grace, a refusal to escalate. These things ripple, and those ripples turn into waves. It may not seem like much, but responsibility is the seed from which revolutions grow. It is the fuel behind every lasting change in history. When enough people take ownership of their role in creating peace, even the most scripted ceasefire can become something more real. There's a tendency in every generation to believe that this moment is different, that this agreement, this ceasefire, will be the one that finally breaks the cycle. But history doesn't lie. It keeps the receipts. It remembers every broken promise dressed as progress, every handshake that disguised hidden knives, every photo op that masked unresolved hatred. When we ask whether the Iran-Israel ceasefire is real or staged, we must ask it in the full context of history, not just of these two nations, but of the entire legacy of peace, making and war marketing that the world has seen before. Look back and you'll find ceasefires that lasted only until the camera stopped flashing. You'll find leaders who signed agreements for appearance's sake, while their armies quietly prepared for the next phase of conflict. You'll see how public declarations of unity were often just pauses for breath, not steps toward healing. History doesn't erase these moments. It etches them deeper. It reminds us that staged peace is often worse than no peace at all, because it gives people false hope, only to leave them more broken when the illusion fades. Think of the Cold War, of Camp David, of Oslo, of countless treaties and lands torn by religion, power, and pride. In every case, the world watched with cautious optimism, hoping against its better judgment. And in some cases, there was progress. In others, it was all theater. We'll rehearse scripts, sign documents, smiling faces that were gone the moment the ink dried. Peace is not proven at the moment of agreement. It is proven in the days, months, and years that follow, when no one's watching but everyone is living. This is why skepticism is not the enemy of hope. It is its companion. Hope without memory is fantasy. But hope with history in its view becomes a force that demands better. When you know how often peace has been promised but never delivered, you stop clapping for announcements and start watching for action. You look for consistency. You look for accountability. You look beyond the curtain to see who's still pulling strings. In the case of Iran and Israel, the stakes aren't just diplomatic. They're deeply human. Behind every agreement are families, who've lost loved ones, communities that have lived in fear for decades, young people raised on mistrust and grief. These wounds don't heal with a ceasefire. They heal when patterns break. They heal when truth is told, not just spoken. They heal when history is acknowledged, not ignored. And so when people say, let's just be positive, they miss the point. Real positivity comes from clarity, not denial. From knowing exactly what has gone wrong before and refusing to let it repeat. This isn't about being cynical. It's about being aware. Because the only thing worse than war is pretending peace has arrived when it hasn't. That's the mistake history teaches to avoid. History has no interest in making us feel good. Its purpose is to make us wise. If we know the stories that came before, the betrayals, the fragile truces, the moments where peace was faked for political survival, then we begin to develop a sharper eye. We start asking better questions. We stop falling for performances and start pushing for transformation. Because the greatest tragedy isn't when history repeats. It's when we let it out of forgetfulness or convenience. Fear is the oldest currency in the world. It's traded in every war room, in every political campaign, in every negotiation behind closed doors. It whispers in the ears of leaders and civilians alike, saying, don't trust them, don't believe this. Don't let go. Fear builds walls. Fear fuels silence. Fear convinces people that revenge is safer than reconciliation. And in the aftermath of a ceasefire, like the one announced between Iran and Israel, fear often speaks louder than faith, because faith asks for something fear never will: courage. In a region defined by distrust and historical trauma, fear is easy to justify. There's a reason people don't let their guard down. There's a reason they hold on to suspicion like armor. It's not irrational, it's inherited. It's passed down through generations of betrayal, war, displacement, death. It's not just personal, it's political, cultural, and generational. So when a ceasefire is declared, the surface may be calm, but beneath it, fear still churns like a storm waiting to resurface. People nod their heads in public, but brace for disappointment in private. Because fear says, we've seen this before, and we know how it ends. But faith, real faith, asks us to walk differently. It doesn't deny what's happened, and it doesn't pretend everything is fine. Faith looks at the brokenness, the loss, the history, and still chooses to believe that change is possible, not guaranteed possible. Faith requires vulnerability, and that is what makes it so terrifying. To believe again after being wounded takes more strength than launching missiles ever could. It takes strength to see your enemy as human. It takes strength to forgive. It takes strength to hope. Faith does not mean blind optimism. It means action rooted in belief. It means choosing to build even while the ground still shakes. It means opening your heart even while the world tells you to shut it tight. In the context of conflict, faith is a revolutionary act. When two nations like Iran and Israel call for a ceasefire, the agreement itself means very little without the human element behind it. Without faith, the ceasefire is a pause. With faith, it can become a path. But the problem is fear is louder. It's immediate, it feeds on headlines and suspicion, and every small misstep. One violation of the ceasefire, real or perceived, and fear uses it as fuel. It grows. It spreads. It infects even those who once had hope. That's how wars restart. That's how peace dies, not with weapons, but with the slow, quiet victory of fear over faith. To move forward, faith must be chosen again and again. It doesn't happen once. It's a discipline. It's shown in everyday acts of dignity and restraint. It's shown when people choose conversation over conflict, when leaders take political risks for the sake of peace, when a father tells his son that the future can be different, even if his past wasn't. These are the acts of faith that matter more than any treaty. And faith, unlike fear, builds. It doesn't just survive, it multiplies. When one person acts in faith, another sees it. It creates a chain. Fear isolates, but faith connects. Fear paralyzes, but faith moves. That's why it's dangerous. That's why it's powerful. Because in a world that runs on fear, faith is a quiet revolution in plain sight. There's a myth that peace is only made by presidents and prime ministers, that unless your name is written in headlines or you're sitting at the table where deals are signed, your voice doesn't matter. But that myth is a lie, a dangerous one. Because peace is not a moment, it's a movement. And movements don't begin in palaces or parliaments. They begin in the hearts of ordinary people who decide they will no longer live according to the rules of hate, revenge, and division. The truth is, you don't have to lead a nation to change the world. You just have to lead yourself, consistently, boldly, and with purpose. The Iran-Israel ceasefire may be debated on the world stage, but its consequences ripple through streets, schools, kitchens, and prayer halls. Real change doesn't always come from the top down. In fact, some of the most powerful shifts in history began when individuals, unnamed, unrecognized, and uncelebrated, chose to be the difference in their own space. They chose not to mirror the hatred that shaped them. They chose not to become what hurt them. They chose to respond to pain with wisdom and to conflict with clarity. You may not hold the power to draft agreements or command armies, but you are the battlefield where peace can win or lose. In your thoughts, in your words, in your actions, you are the meeting point between what has been and what could be. And that is not a small thing. That is everything. Because if enough people take up that role, the entire energy of a society begins to shift. That's how culture changes. That's how history bends. Being the difference means refusing to let bitterness speak for you. It means choosing curiosity over contempt. It means having the courage to speak peace, even when everyone around you is shouting war. And sometimes being the difference is quiet. It's holding space for someone's story. It's admitting when you're wrong. It's stepping back when your ego wants to charge forward. It's easy to light a fire with rage. It takes more to build a bridge with love. Conflict teaches people to look at each other with suspicion, to see the other side as less human, less worthy. But when you choose to listen, to understand, to humanize, you're dismantling that conditioning brick by brick. You're taking power away from propaganda and giving it back to empathy. And every time you do that, you are being the difference. You're showing someone else that it can be done, that there is another way. That peace isn't a myth or a speech or a slogan. It's a lifestyle. It's how you show up every single day, how you speak to your children, how you treat strangers, how you carry your pain without passing it on. We can't keep waiting for the world to become peaceful before we decide to act peacefully. Because peace doesn't come from the world. It comes from within. It is born when people make the hard choice to rise above their anger, their fear, their history, and their pride. And when enough people do that, what once seemed impossible begins to take shape. That's not fantasy. That's not hope without roots. That's transformation born from intention. It starts where you are with what you have right now. Because in the end, you don't have to change the world alone. You just have to make sure the world changes because you are here. Peace is not a prize handed out at the end of war. It is a test of character, of vision, and of truth. The Iran-Israel ceasefire may have paused the noise, but the silence that follows is not peace unless it is filled with action, healing, and hard choices. You've heard the promises. You've seen the gestures. But now, you must look deeper. Ask yourself, is this peace or performance? Because history doesn't lie and fear doesn't wait. But neither does responsibility. Neither does faith. And neither should you. You don't need permission to be a force for good. You don't need a title to be a leader. Right now, in your home, in your community, in your choices, you carry the power to turn a ceasefire into something lasting, into something real. Don't wait for change. Be the change. Don't hope for peace. Levitt. Be the difference this world is starving for. And when history looks back, let it see your fingerprints not on the problems, but on the solution.